The industry of the future is calling, and we're answering. With truly open automation to fuel the next generation of efficient, resilient operations. With practices that protect our planet and empower the ones bringing tomorrow's industry to life today. The industry of the future is open. Are you in? Life is on.
Before I start, I'd like to draw attention to Goldfields' forward-looking statement, and I'd also like to thank Goldfields for allowing me to give this keynote address. When we talk about connecting and integrating mines, I think it's important to look at some holistic concepts. I think today there are many technical systems that are in the industry: artificial intelligence, data analytics, or augmented intelligence, IT, OT integrations. Many of these systems are truly innovative in themselves, and many of them are truly technical revolutions in themselves. But I think it's important to understand, how do all these systems and processes connect? How do they actually deliver a better outcome for us when we're talking about managing mines? So what I'd like to do is really look at this from a more holistic, very basic point of view. How do all these systems really coalesce together to help us manage mines in a more efficient way for the 21st century? When we actually start to look at this aspect, I think it's important to go back over history. Over the last 30 years, the mining industry, and in particular industry itself, has sought over at least 4 or 5 times to harness innovation and technology to improve efficiencies. We've seen at least major 4 ways, and the last one has been the information revolution. If we look at the history of mining, even though people have complained that mining is behind, if you look at over 100 years of history, mining has been through some substantial changes. Certainly from when my grandfather started in the Welsh coal mines, where he was hired as a 14-year-old boy in horse haulage, to today, we're looking for highly autonomous operations, which are actually driven from a remote operating center. If you look back, certainly in my career time in the 1970s and the 80s, some of our industry was highly manual with air legging type of techniques. But what really, when we look at all these histories, what really is innovation and technology in the mining context? What do we really want to do with innovation and technology? And how does that really help us connect, integrate, and better manage mines in the 21st century? So it's important to actually explore that. So the first point which I'd like to talk about is, what is the definition of innovation in the mining context? I think I've just had a look at it. There are over 1,000 definitions I've found of innovation. Every year we have a different definition of innovation. But what really is innovation when we look at this in terms of the mining industry? Certainly, what I like is a Harvard Business School's definition of innovation is something new and useful. And in many cases, we're trying to use innovation to solve problems by finding a solution that is new and useful. I think there's lots of things out there that are new, but how many things are really useful to the mining industry? How many things can we actually use which are new and useful to better manage our operations, to make them more efficient? When we look at this, we really look at as technology as being a tool of innovation to help us solve some of these problems, to better manage our operations. But when we hook this all together, we're really talking about modernizing the mining industry for the 21st century, using innovation as a way to improve processes by looking at new and useful technology and new and useful systems. So it's important to understand that we're fundamentally trying to modernize the mining industry for the 21st century. If we look at what would be the aims of modernizing the mining industry for the 21st century, and what would be the aims of any form of innovation or technology program, I think there are basically four major aims which we would be looking at. The first aim would be to improve the safety of our workforce, to further go down the road of zero harm to the workforce, not only in physical safety, but also in actual mental health, in actually the health of our workforce. Another aspect which we'd look at is really to improve efficiency, to use innovation and technology to improve efficiency. And I think when we look at this in a very basic form, we're really talking about using technology and innovation to improve our processes and systems, to increase short-term interval control efficiency, to allow better compliance to plan, to drive better volumes, and to drive costs down. And also from those digital processes, where we're looking to harvest data that we can use for debottlenecking to further drive efficiencies, further drive increases in volumes, and further drive costs down. There's another important aspect when we look at the 21st century or the fourth industrial revolution is the amount of aspects and pressures the mine industry is facing in terms of social license to operate. So any form of I&T program which would make our mines better to manage in a connected manner would actually look at this aspect of social license to operate, such as enriching our communities with better training, enriching our communities with better, but less pollution to our aspects. The other one which becomes majorly important as we move into the 21st century with the societal climate change concerns is we need to improve our environmental footprint, which the mine industry has. And things such as green power, wind turbines, solar plants, battery efficiency, better water discharge. So any form of I&T program would need to actually address the issues of improving our working environment. So when we look at this concept of managing mines better, we're really talking about modernizing our mines for the 21st century and using innovation and technology as a major tool with, as I said, the four principal aims: improving safety of the workforce, improving efficiency, improving license to operate, and improving our environmental footprint. If we move on and we try to say, how would we put these things into some form of modernization program to better manage our mines for the 21st century? I think the first one we would need to do is have some form of strategy that allows us to achieve that. And in terms of that, we've obviously would need some vision, which I'll talk about later, but also the four aims which I've outlined. And it's important that we have a strategy with visions and aim. So when we put all these processes and systems and technical tools together, what does this really give us? What does this really look like? And I'll talk a little bit about the vision in terms of that and some of the ambiguity aspects of that vision. We would also need some form of digital component or digital stream, because obviously digital mining and digitization of our mine industry becomes important. And once we've changed things, the way in which we work with these tools and the way in which we would operate and manage these mines would actually change as well. And hence we would actually need some form of new social architecture or way in which we would work in these operations. This slide shows you Goldfields' vision for 2025, and we call this the Horizon 2 vision. And we're talking about in 2025, this is what Goldfields mines you would see. And you can clearly see that our vision comprises of 12 components. Some of them are hard technical components, some of them are soft technical components where you talk about human interaction, such as collaboration, new ways of working. Hard technical components such as operating centers, remote equipment, drones. But you can see that we've put a holistic vision together how we'd actually operate by 2025. In many cases, putting a vision together is extremely difficult because you are actually looking into the future and there is a certain degree of ambiguity about it, but you have to put down some form of vision, even if you believe that vision will alter, but you have to put some form of direction down. So this becomes an increasingly important part of this journey of managing and connecting minds, is to have a vision how you would actually do this. I've spoken about the aspects of social architecture, and I've actually said the impacts of understanding that the way in which you would work in the 21st century would change. Certainly the evidence which we've had has shown that if you do not change the ways in which you work or change the social architecture of your minds or your businesses, your modernization or innovation programs will actually fail. When we look at social architecture, it comprises of two major components. We call it hardware, which is really the tasks you would do, and some of these basic tasks would actually change. And the formal organizational structure, how you'd run these companies. We would then talk about culture and people, which is really the software of the organization. So these become intrinsic parts of how we would actually run a modern world, how we would actually run connected minds, integrated minds, and how we'd actually manage our minds better by using innovation technology as a vehicle. We talk about skills for the future. I think this is a really important part of this and comes in terms of the software or the people and cultural side. When I look at skills, this is a really complex problem, and it's important to chunk this into some very, very basic steps. I think certainly, the journey in the next 100 years is really complex, and you have to chunk it into digestible chunks. If you look at the theory of what people are coming out with the fourth industrial revolution, the general theory suggests that round about 2025, we would see a tipping point in society, how we'd actually operate in society. So certainly in Goldfields, we've broken this down into pre-2025 and post-2025. When we look at this aspect of where we are in the next quarter decade, three major skill groups actually become emergent. We would need something on the digital function. Some companies actually started to move beyond IT into a true digital function where we've integrated IT, OT with digital leadership to actually start to move your IT function from a truly operational function into an integrated aspect of the minds. So digital becomes a real major skill group, and having digital skills in that. The other skill group which people sometimes forget is human resource planning. As you change the way in which you work and the ways in work change, you need lots of human resources to achieve that. Your human resources function tends to change from more of a transactional to an organizational design and true human management. So it's important to understand that you will need human resources. The other one not to forget is operational skills. Even though the environment of your operators will change, even though the operators themselves may change, we still are going to require people to operate our mines and our mills and refineries and all the downstream facilities. So it's important to understand that we are going to need operators. The one I'll put up on the top of the slide is it's important to remove the human attributes. In other words, what types of people will we require from the actual skills. What becomes very, very evident when you read the literature and the people who are knowledgeable in this aspect is whichever function you have, the ability for employees to have a higher degree of complex problem skills, and also being able to integrate with technical and human systems and leadership becomes a predominant human attribute which you would look at this. So if we move back, these are the three major skill groups of digital, human resources, and operational, and the attribute is really problem solving and systems working. So these are some of the key aspects which we would look at, how some of the key aspects and fundamental aspects we actually start to consider when we look at integrated, connection for better operating minds or better managing minds in the 21st century. I'd really like to thank Goldfields for the opportunity to present this keynote address. And I'd like to thank IMARC for the opportunity as well. And I hope this actually has been interesting, and I hope I actually given food to thought about some very, very fundamental points and strategic points of how we would organize to better manage mines in the 21st century using innovation and technology and connected systems.
The industry of the future is calling, and we're answering. With truly open automation to fuel the next generation of efficient, resilient operations. With practices that protect our planet and empower the ones bringing tomorrow's industry to life today. The industry of the future is open. Are you in? Life is on.